Hey, it's Ann from Ann Moyer Singing, and I am a bel canto teacher, so I have to make sure you understand that most of the advice I'm going to give is intended for a bel canto student, although a lot of it can be used for other kinds of singing as well. Having said that, y'all talk funny. And from a singing perspective, everyone talks funny. From a professional singer standpoint, people are not supposed to sing in English or Italian or whatever. They sing in IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet. Those are the funny versions of words using letter-like symbols that follow a word in the dictionary and tell you how to pronounce it. Every modern language has these IPA definitions worked out, and so any language you might want to sing in, it's there. But you're going to find it's not quite like what you'll hear from a native speaker of the language when they speak or sing it. It'll be a little different. Regionalisms exist. So this is an issue that every new student is going to have to deal with, and it's an issue they don't even know exists. There are decades of these regional habits to undo. So when we're taught to speak, we're given a language or two from our families. Baby goes from wails and coos and instinctive sounds to more controlled sounds. We get taught the concepts of basic vowel and consonants. And while some families sing to their children, speech becomes the majority of the vocal focus that a kid's going to get. And in learning this, they stop using this instinctive system and start using the tongue, throat, larynx, and jaw in ways that support the language. Now, this gets all of these components pulling on each other in all kinds of ways that don't really matter when we speak, but can really matter when we sing. And so there are isolating exercises to work all of these pieces independently to kind of implement a divorce between them. Because there are times that we want the student to use just the tongue, just the jaw, not do something with the larynx. And so they need to get used to undoing all that association. For example, if you raise the back of the tongue, it can induce twang. And using an exercise, you take this twang raised position and then let the back of the tongue come down into a clean sound and back up into twang and just slide back and forth between the two as an exercise. It helps the student understand, one, how to eliminate it when they have to. And because when they go up in pitch, usually that tightness is going to come in and that back of the tongue is going to want to raise. And guess what? This exercise helps them keep it down. And then depending upon the style of music that they're singing, they may want to add it. Most of my students are not singing opera and musical theater. They're singing rock and pop and metal. So, they want to have this in their toolbox. So there are similar isolation exercises for all of this, and that's something that the student should be shown to help them be better equipped to do what you're asking them to do when you're trying to correct them. So going back to that baby, parents are well-meaning, but I've got to say that language is a virus. Quoth the singer and sage Laurie Anderson. Language is something that we make sure to give everyone we meet. If we hear a new word, we want to learn what it is. If a foreign speaker pronounces something incorrectly, we'll offer to correct it out of politeness. So over time, what we use and get for language becomes a conglomeration of the world we existed in as a child and then built from our interactions into becoming an adult. And then as a teacher, we need to consider that languages have different features. Some languages are very melodic and some are not. Some have a lot of vowel sounds and some don't have that many. Some have special rules for handling certain letter sequences, double consonants, vowel this after those particular consonants are treated like this or that. Some treat them as firm sounds or others as gestures like nasal consonants in French. But these all become ingrained habits for the speaker. And in the past few years, I've taught over 100 students from all over the world. A very small portion of my students are in the US, where I'm based here in Philadelphia. And I find that every student has different habits depending on the language they first learned. If you listen to an Eastern European singing American lyrics, one of the first things that a teacher is going to hear is the odd vowel choices or the slightly off consonant emphasis. Diphthongs sound different. If I've got a German, Italian, or Spanish or Norwegian speaking student, they use R's differently than people do in English. And all of these native language habits show up in the other language they're trying to sing in, even though they're copying the other singer. So I can show examples of someone demonstrating speech in German when they're pointing at the top of the map of Germany and it sounds one way, and then they point in this next region down and it sounds a little different, and the next region down it sounds a little different. And as it travels south, the voice gets more full and more weighty. And that's just the way that the people from those regions talk. Same language, very different sound. So that sound comes from culture as well as from region. I've got I know a person who's studying Japanese, and part of the program was to watch movies in the language that they were learning. And at one point they're being evaluated and told, your Japanese is very good, but you need to watch something other than Yakuza films. You're starting to sound like a gangster. So there's lots of things that are going to have affected the student's speech by the time they get to you. So the IPA serves as a standard guide to what the student should be aiming for with a particular word, but a native singer sings in a native accent. The accent is only situationally important. If you're playing a role in a production, you've got rules you got to follow. If I'm in New York, or if I'm in Ireland, or if there's just tons of examples where you've got to take on an affected voice, an accent. But if you're just singing for yourself, the regionalisms, pick one. Like if I'm a foreign language speaker and I'm going to sing country music, well, then I'm probably going to pick an accent that comes from the southern United States. But you pick one and you stick with it. Now, know that it's very difficult to get it perfect without a ton of effort. You'll almost always be detectable as a non-native speaker. Opera singers struggle with this as part of their job description. They must sound linguistically clean, so they go to IPA. Now, most students, when they get to you, when they sing something, they're using mimicry. They'll just copy the sounds that they hear from their favorite performer. They mimic basically the radio edit of the singer's voice as much as possible. This means they're copying the original singer's bad habits, and they're trying to reproduce some things that were done afterwards in the studio. So we have to get the student to try and find their own voice. And that means that you treat the body like it's a physical instrument, like it's a flute or a bassoon. You use it thus and so, and you get result X. And you've got to get the student to trust the process that makes that sound. And their sound is their sound. Nobody likes their own voice. But once you find what your voice is, then there are acting skill things that you can bring in to characterize your voice in tone, in color, to do any kind of style that you want. But you have to find your own voice first. Now, one of the best tools that I've run into for getting a teacher or a student on track with what something should sound like is a book called Diction by John Moriarty. I can't recommend this book enough. It has 4 sections in it: Italian, Latin, French, and German. And Italian is the one you want to pay attention to if we're singing in English. There's all kinds of examples of words using sound X versus sound Y, so it's easy to really clarify what it's supposed to sound like. And there's a bunch of different exercises that help a student step through the process so that they can fine-tune their ability to transition between them. The exercises in this book will help any student narrow down the vowel sound choices that they make to the ones appropriate for English. They may be boring to do, but they will help you sound better. So thank you for joining me this week. I'll see you next week, and have fun teaching and singing. Be well. Peace.